Most companies never expand beyond the local market, not because they can't, but because they don't even try. Today we are talking with someone who didn't just try. He failed, he learned, and he built a company to fix the entire system. Welcome Thomas Lehtewirta, CEO and co-founder of Omendon.
Thank you.
Thomas, before we get into Omendon, I want to start with you. You have been involved in multiple companies, but what stands out is you're not someone who talks about success. You talk about mistakes, lessons, and execution. Can you just briefly introduce yourself to our listeners? Who are you and what drives you today?
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. I'm an entrepreneur based in Helsinki, but more importantly, I'm someone obsessed with execution. What really drives me right now is fixing one broken belief, that international expansion is something only big companies can do. Especially in the Nordics, I see a lot of strong companies, great products, great innovations, but they stay local. Not because they can't expand, but because it feels too complex, too risky, or too far away. And that's the core problem I've been focusing on now. How do we make expansion something that's actually accessible, not just for big corporations, but for any ambitious company? Because in reality, most companies don't fail because of lack of opportunity. They fail because they stay in their comfort zone. And for me, the philosophy is simple. Bravery plus action always beats comfort.
Why do you think that is, and why don't companies take that step?
Honestly, I think it comes down to three main things. First, companies focus on the wrong question. Instead of asking, how do we expand, they ask, why should we? And when you start from the angle, you always find reasons not to move. And the second one, most companies are optimized for stability, not growth. Especially in the Nordics, businesses are built to run efficiently, not to take risks. But the reality is simple. No risk, no expansion, no real growth. And third, lack of clarity. Companies don't know what it will cost, how long it takes, what the actual return looks like. So they stay where things feel predictable. And I've seen this personally. When we took a company from Finland to the UAE, it wasn't that the opportunity wasn't there. It was that everything around it felt unclear. And that's exactly the gap we are solving now with Omendon. We remove the uncertainty so companies can actually take the step.
Okay, so let's go back to the moment that everything were changed in your life. You had a startup in Finland, and what made you to go outside of Finland?
This was actually a turning point for me. At that time, we had a business in Finland that was doing quite well locally, but there was a clear ceiling. The market is small, the seasons are brutal, and at some point I realized I cannot scale this the way I want. That's when I started to look outside, and Dubai stood out immediately. The demand, the speed of business, the capital flowing in, it was a complete different level. I remember seeing data that there's something like 10 to 15x more investment capital moving there than compared to Finland. So naturally I thought, let's expand. But here's the reality hit me. I tried to do it remotely and nothing happened. No replies, no real access, no support. And that's when I made a decision that I need to go there myself. I went there alone, no network, no contacts, just to figure it out. And that changed everything. Once I was in the ground, things started to move. I had meetings, connections, partners. Step by step, we built a network from scratch. Eventually, we had real traction. We had investors interested, partners ready, customers lined up. And we even validated the demand through social media campaigns and direct sales. But then, right before scaling, not finding a suitable partner, issues killed the whole expansion. And that was probably the most frustrating part, because the opportunity was real and the demand was there. The only problem was execution and structure. And that's exactly where the idea of Omendon comes from. I realized it shouldn't be this hard to expand a business internationally. You shouldn't need to fly across the world, build everything from zero, and still risk everything failing because of fragmentation. So we started building Omendon to solve that exact problem, to make global expansion result-driven, structured, executable, and accessible to all, without all of that chaos.
So it's interesting, based on the rule of thumb, you did everything and it should work. You did research, partnership, network, but it didn't. So can you tell us why was that and how did you handle that?
Yes, and that's exactly what made it frustrating, because on paper, everything was right. We had market validation, interest, partners, even early traction, but still it didn't work. And the reason was actually very simple. Everything took too long. As a startup, you don't have unlimited time or resources. You can't wait 6 to 12 months for things to maybe work. Every step was slow, manual, dependent on someone, and completely unpredictable. There was no system, no clear process, no single partner who could just take ownership and execute. So even though the opportunity was there, we ran out of time before we could capture it. And that's a very painful place to be as founder, because you know it should work, but you just can't make it happen fast enough. And after that, I started talking to a lot of founders, and almost everyone had the same story. Different industry, same problem. Expansion is messy, manual, and unpredictable. And that's when it really clicked for me. Expansion is not a strategy problem, it's an execution problem. And if you solve execution, you solve expansion.
This is interesting, Thomas. When companies wanted to talk about expansions, always the same questions pop up. I collected some of the questions here. Is there a demand? How much will it cost? Who do I trust to help me? How long will this take? From your experience, what is actually broken here?
Honestly, I think the whole system is broken. Not the opportunity, not the markets. The way expansion is done is broken. Because if you look at it today, it doesn't make sense. You're expected to hire consultants, find local partners, manage multiple vendors, run market research, build sales channels, all separately. No single system, no clear ownership, no guaranteed outcomes. And that creates 5 big problems. First, it's too slow. Expansion takes months, sometimes years. Second, it's too expensive. You're paying multiple parties without knowing if it will work. Third, it's fragmented. Everyone does their part, but no one owns the results. Fourth, it's overly complex. You need to coordinate everything yourself. And fifth, there's no accountability. If it fails, no one is really responsible. So from a founder's perspective, it's actually irrational, because you're taking high risk with unclear costs, unclear timelines, and unclear outcomes. And that's why most companies don't expand. Not because they don't want to, but because the system around the expansion is fundamentally broken.
So instead of accepting a broken system, you decided to build something new, which is where your company Omendon comes in. What is Omendon? What makes it different?
Exactly. After going through that experience, it became very clear to me the problem wasn't the market, it was the system around expansion. So instead of trying to work around it, we decided to rebuild it completely. That's how Omendon was born. At its core, Omendon is an operating system for global expansion. Instead of working with 5 to 10 different providers, consultants, agencies, local partners, you have one system that handles everything from strategy to execution. And that's the key difference. Most solutions stop at advice. Omendon is built for execution. We don't just tell you where to go, we actually open the market for you. Sales channels, partners, setup, growth, all structured inside one system. And because it's built that way, what used to take 6 to 12 months can now be done in around 90 days. But more importantly, it removes the biggest friction companies have: complexity. You don't need to understand every market, every regulation, or build everything yourself. You just need one thing: to decide to grow. And we handle the rest. So in simple terms, Omendon turns expansion from something complex and risky into something structured, predictable, and executable. It's typical for companies to pay up to 100,000 euros for just a single market research. And the reality is Does a market research execute your expansion? No, it doesn't. You can get some valuable information. You understand how structures work, how to enter the market, and what are the suitable partners for your concept and such, distribution channels. But none of these things have been executed. You don't need to spend huge budgets on market researches, finding suitable partners, hiring consultants, setting up your own team anymore.
So interesting. You mentioned that companies have typically paid up to 100,000 euros for market research or partnership. And we all know that these costs doesn't always equal to successful expansion. In your point of view, how should successful expansion look?
This is where I think the biggest shift needs to happen. Because today the expansion is treated like a project. You hire consultants, you run research, you build the plans. But after months, you still haven't entered the market.
Yeah, okay.
That's the old model. What expansions should actually look like is completely different. It should be treated like a system, not like a project. And that changes everything. Instead of theory, you start with execution. Reports, you focus on results. Multiple providers, you use one integrated system. So the goal is not let's understand the market perfectly. The goal is let's enter the market fast, validate and grow. Because in reality, you don't learn markets from research. You learn by being in them. And that's why speed matters so much. The faster you can enter, the faster you can get real feedback, real customers and real results. And the second point is simplification. Today, companies are forced to manage everything themselves. Different partners, different processes, different timelines. That shouldn't be the case. It should be one system, one process, one point of execution. And that's exactly how we have built Omendon. We combine technology for speed and structure with human execution on the ground. So companies don't just plan expansion, they actually execute it.
Okay, you have experienced this journey yourself firsthand, and that's really also interesting insight. So I wanted to shift conversation slightly into mindset, because we see that isn't just about the strategy, it's about mindset. So I've noticed on social media you have talked about clarity, peace of mind, and habits. So how does mindset connect to business decisions?
That's an excellent question. And I actually think this is one of the most underestimated parts of business. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to decisions. And the quality of your decisions depends on the quality of your state. If you are operating from stress, pressure, or chaos, you make reactive decisions. And reactive decisions are usually wrong. But when you're calm, when you have clarity, you can actually see things as they are. And that directly affects execution. And execution is driven by consistent, clear decisions over time. That's where discipline comes in. The habits you build in your personal life, consistency, structure, focus, they transfer directly into business. And I've seen this in expansion specifically. When you remove fear and noise, you start seeing opportunities that others don't. You're able to take calculated risks, move faster, and commit where others hesitate. And that's usually where the biggest growth happens. So for me, mindset is not about motivation. It's about being in a state where you can execute at the highest level consistently.
So it seems you are flying through the questions. So let's make it a bit more uncomfortable. What is the one thing that you think is completely wrong in this industry?
Well, I think the biggest thing that is wrong in this industry is that it's built on transactional relationships. Most consultants, agencies, even partners, they get paid whether you succeed or not. And that creates a completely misaligned system. Because from the client's perspective, you're taking all the risk, but the people you work with are not really accountable for the outcome. And that's why so many expansions fail. Not because the opportunity is not there, but because no one actually owns the results. I think that model is outdated. What we need instead is partnership-driven ecosystem, where everyone involved is aligned with one single goal: success. Not deliverables, not reports, not billable hours, but real results. Because when incentives are aligned, everything changes. Speed improves, execution improves, decisions improve. And that's when businesses actually grow. So for me, it's very simple. If you are not tied to the outcome, you are not really a partner.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because for most of people nowadays, money talks and money is everything, and that's really interesting. But, I have another question. It has been a really good era for AI tools and generative AI, and they are growing. And you mentioned that Omendon is utilizing AI. But what is the differences between Omendon and other platforms? And why should people trust Omendon rather than using the generative AIs by themselves? Where do they really need Omendon?
That's an excellent question. The real problem is that people think expansion is about knowledge. It's not. It's about execution. And execution across border is extremely complex. AI alone doesn't solve that problem. It actually creates a false sense of progress. What we've built with Omendon is infrastructure. AI is just one layer, the speed. On top of that, we've built a system that connects strategy, partners and execution into one flow. So instead of companies spending 6 to 18 months trying to figure things out, they can enter a new market in a structured, controlled way and actually start generating revenue. Mm-hmm. That's the real difference. You can think of Omendon like an Uber for GTM access. Right. With Uber, you can get to the destination you want to go as easy and as fast as possible. You can think of Omendon as the same way. Okay. A few clicks and we take you where you need to go in order to grow, without you breaking a sweat.
Thomas, you have earlier mentioned that many companies in Finland and Nordic think too small. As someone who only moved to Finland 7 months ago, I can also feel that. And I can't understand that. And so what do you mean when you say that? And what do you think that companies here think too small?
This is something I've thought about quite a lot. I don't think it's about lack of talent. Finland and the Nordics have incredible companies and innovations. The challenge is more about how people define success and risk. In many Nordic cultures, there's a strong focus on stability, balance and security. And those are great things, but they can sometimes come at the cost of ambition and at a global scale. So companies end up optimizing for how do we build a good business here instead of how big could this actually become globally. And that shift is everything. Because once you start thinking globally, your questions change. You stop asking, can we do this? And you start asking, who do we need to partner with to make this 10x bigger? Another big factor is perceived complexity. Expansion feels risky, unclear, expensive. So many companies just stay local by default. Not because they lack potential, but because the path forward is unclear. And I've seen this firsthand. When you remove that uncertainty and unclarity and show a clear path to execution, suddenly the same companies think much bigger. So the opportunity is not missing. It's just underutilized.
Yeah, I was comparing this situation in Nordic countries with Middle East. I was born and raised in Iran, and I've been all of my life there. Despite what's going on in the Middle East, there's a strong drive for growth. But I think that is missing in Nordic companies, and actually Nordic companies I think are frozen, kind of.
That's an interesting point, and actually it's pretty valid at this moment because we all know what is happening in Middle East and UAE and Iran, of course. And I think people and company owners especially, they tend to take them as a fact what is happening in the news. And people don't really question things in the media. Is this really true? What is the image they want to show here? And blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And in reality, only thing you can know for sure if you talk to people inside the country. You don't listen to news and what they are showing. Of course, they want you to watch the news. They make clickbait and etc. And then that's how they influence you. You get fearful. You don't want to go to the market. There's a war, blah, blah, blah.
And
but
uncertainty.
In reality, I have had at least 15 meetings in these few days to Dubai, and all are safe. They don't even remember any bombs anymore.
Yeah.
They're living their normal life, business as usual, and growth as usual. So even though of the conflict that is happening now in UAE and Middle East, the market is still growing, and the people are still trying their best to achieve a better future. And people are still looking to move to the market, open a company and such, because they want to have a better future for themselves and their families. Yeah. And this is actually an interesting timing because majority of the companies at this moment are fearful. They look somewhere else than Middle East. They cannot even access there and they don't want to. But what it creates is an opportunity for those who actually want to win. Those who at this moment enter the market. They capture a market share that will last for years. When competitors and other companies don't even look at that way. You have a beautiful chance and opportunity to go. Just take it. And with Omendon, you don't even have to travel to the market. We take care of it for you.
Okay.
My goal is not to make a sales pitch, but I just see an opportunity, and I believe many people watching this also see an opportunity, and we just help these individuals and company owners who want to grow with a beautiful chance. You don't have to go to the market. We take care of it for you. And I think facts are facts. No need to fly, no need to hire a team, no need to open a company. None of that. Just go to Omendon website, check what we have, expand if you want to. In fact, the best time to act is when everybody else is fearful. Why? Because there's no competition. If you have a valid business in your home country and you want to expand to the Middle East because it's full of cash, let's be honest, now is your chance. Nobody else is looking at that market. Your competitors are focusing on the local markets. Just take the step.
If someone is hearing our podcast and they're doing well, maybe locally, but they're unsure to expand their business globally, what would you tell them?
Well, that's a funny point because I've been talking to many people and companies in UAE and also in Nordics, and I've noticed that Nordic companies, they're the ones who are fearful. They're the ones who doesn't want to grow. They don't want to take the steps, take the risk because of fear. I've talked to people in UAE and companies. It's totally opposite. They're positive, they're happy, they're looking to grow, they want to expand. And even though Nordic companies are safe, they don't have nothing to worry about. But the opposite is that the UAE companies, they're the ones who want to grow.
Yeah.
And they're in a conflict. They don't have fear. That's why that side of the globe is full of abundance, because of this mindset shift. They're thinking differently. Money has a different concept in UAE than in Nordic countries.
So how does a business feel comfortable to expand?
I would say this, if your business works in one market, there's a very high chance it can work in another one also. The biggest mistake I see is not failure, it's waiting too long. People wait for the perfect moment, perfect plan, perfect clarity. But in expansion, clarity comes from after action, not before. So the first step is simple, start testing. Not a full expansion, just validate the demand. Talk to the market, open conversations, because once you get real feedback, everything becomes clear. The second thing is mindset. You have to accept that it won't be perfect. Expansion is messy, but it's not a problem. That's part of the process. If you look at top performers and athletes in any field, they won't win because they're perfect. They win because they take more shots. Business is the same. The companies that grow globally are not the ones who wait. They are the ones who move early and adjust fast. So don't aim for perfect expansion, aim for momentum, because momentum is what creates results. For example, top athletes, let's say in football or basketball, you'd think these top players are thinking always that I need to score a goal. No, they're just thinking already that if I don't score, I will shoot again.
Yeah.
Until I do.
Yeah, consistency is the key, actually.
Yes.
So, okay, Thomas, in just one sentence, what does global growth actually require?
So in one sentence, bravery, structured execution, and bold action. In one word, Omendon.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, Thomas, thank you for sharing this valuable insight with us and the story of Omendon. There are so many key takeaways. So if there is one thing to take from this episode is that growth doesn't happen by staying comfortable. It happens when you step into unknown, beyond your comfort zone, and keep going. And of course, if you are looking to expand your business into the UAE and beyond, visit omendon.com to get more information. And who knows, maybe you get a call with Thomas.